So the wheel of the year, here we are, back at the graphic which you have in front of you. And how do we make this relevant, actually relevant to our own lives? Because like I said, most of us are not gonna pick up our lives and become nomads right away. But I do think that we can use this as a place to think about the relationships we already have with plants in our lives, or the relationships that we want to be building with them. And so I would like to just take us through a little journey on this wheel to think about our own lives. The purpose is to bring more awareness to the relationships we have, to acknowledge the relationships we have with the plants, and to respect them, the ones that we already have, or vision ideas that we would, ideas of plants we want to create relationships with. Some of us might feel hard on ourselves, like, oh, I don't really know any wild plants, or this isn't really my thing. But I would encourage us just to think of any plant in our life, perhaps a weed, something in your backyard, something on the crack of the sidewalk, the trees that you see. You don't even have to know the name of it at this point. So it's really just an exercise. So I would invite you all to just sink into your memory a little bit, and if you want to close your eyes, you can. And I would like to bring you to the place of the fall time that we're looking forward to now. In the next month or two, the leaves are going to start dropping, the cold winds are going to blow in. What does it feel like to you at this time of year? Can you imagine last year at this time, what was happening for you? Where were you? Are there any particular feelings that you have? Are there any particular plants that you notice, that stand out in your memory? Like, well, maybe you didn't notice it at other times of year, but now you really notice it. Maybe it's the leaves changing color, something like that. If a plant comes to mind, go ahead and put it on your mat. And as you head farther into winter, things get colder and colder, all the leaves are off the trees now. What are some plants that you would want to have around as you head into that dark time? Are there plants you want to have in your house? Are there plants that you see as you're walking your dog to the park? Things that are more vibrant this time of year? And how about in the deep of winter? In the deep, before the spring has started? What's happening around you at that time? There's not much going on. But is there anything that, particularly if there are plants that you might want to harvest and use for medicine or food at that time, they would be really special? And into the springtime, into that first beginning of spring, what are the fresh green leaves that attract you most in the springtime? Something in your garden even, some tree that you like to watch burst forth. And deeper into the green season, what greens do you like when they're really growing strong and maybe they get bigger? Or something in the springtime, around the spring equinox, is there flowers that are going off that you really like? What's blooming then? What smells really good? Is there any of your favorite medicines? And into the time of Beltane in the southeast, in the early May, even more. So many flowers to choose from at that time. What would you put there? It's like a time of bursting forth exuberance, happy reproduction. And into the summertime, into the deep summer, where do you want to be in the summertime? What's the most comfortable place? When you're most attracted to that place, what's growing around you? And as the summer begins to wane, kind of in the time that we are now, is there anything you've noticed in the past week or two of plants that are around you that maybe you've noticed and you're like, oh yeah, that one's really happy right now? things are starting to die back. Maybe it's a root or something that attracts you. So, and where are you in all these different places where you're noticing the plants? Are you at the river? Are you in the mountains? Maybe you're at the coast, your backyard, alleyways. Where do you go to hang out with these plants that you've perhaps put on your map? Where are their growing, where are their happy spots? And another question might be, what are some ways that your relationship with them might feed them and give back to them? Is there some way that even just getting to know them could help them? Or is there some way that harvesting them could bring benefit to those plants, like in the way I was talking about? And this might take more research and more understanding, and this is just dropping the thought for us. So I'm just going to go through a few quick examples of plants that to me really stand out to the different seasons in my seasonal cycle. And at this time of year, in the autumn, I really think of acorns and the oaks and what a staple food they are. And I don't know if you can see this, but this is an acorn woodpecker stash in an oak tree. In an oak stand, they've stashed all these little acorns. It's their winter food cache. So oaks are a really, really foundational part of many of the most highly food-producing ecosystems that we have in this region. And they produce tons and tons of food. One tree could feed many families on a good year. And also, they support a really diverse fungal community underneath the soil, which helps the diversity of all the wildflowers around them. So oaks are really, really important. And they're also a powerful medicine. They're powerfully astringent, and they have aspirin-like compounds that help with pain. And then when I move towards the winter solstice, I think of Douglas fir, because for a couple of reasons. One reason is because when there's no other green plants around, Douglas fir is that symbol of eternal life. It's that still green foliage that smells so good and so pungent, and reminds us that even though we're in the dead of winter, that the life will return. And this is a picture of a pile of Douglas fir boughs on fire. Because, like I said, in the past few years, I've been doing forestry work in the wintertime. And so I like to go to the oak savannas where the oaks have been overtaken by Douglas fir trees because there hasn't been a fire there in so long. And I cut down the Douglas fir trees and I burn them in little burn piles. And then I return those ashes back to the habitat to spread those nutrients back to the oak trees as a way of kind of like acting like the fire, in substituting my actions for what the fire would do. And so Douglas fir. And as we move into the later part of winter, into spring, I think of poplar or black cottonwood, which is so fun for me in the spring, in that cold, snap winter morning, to go out after a big rain and windstorm. There's been all these branches knocked down off the big trees in the riparian zone by the river. And I go out there in the morning and the buds are still frozen so that their gummy, goopy sap of the medicine of the poplar buds doesn't stick on my hands, and snap those buds off. And I like to use the poplar buds for all kinds of things, but it's known in the Bible as the balm of Gilead, and it's a powerful medicine for both helping with an expectorant for the lungs, for helping with pain, and externally for all kinds of bruises and burns and scrapes. So I love poplar, and I always look forward to that winter time when it's poplar season. And then, funny enough, this plant isn't actually from our bioregion, but my seasonal cycle, if I was going to make a seasonal round, which I'm doing, I go down to the southwest, to southern California and Arizona in the springtime, around the spring equinox, and there I really love the plant chaparral, the Rhea tridentata. And here it is blooming in March with those beautiful sunny little bursts. Chaparral is a really powerful medicine that's been used for all kinds of things throughout the ages. It's kind of it's a pharmacopoeia, as they say, so many different uses for it. And I particularly like to use it as a strong antioxidant for the sun. So this is one of my powerful plant allies. And if I spent every March here, I would have a different plant in there. And so then back to the spring before Beltane is Oregon grape, one of my favorites. And I love going to the old growth forest in the rainy springtime when the big trees shelter me from that rain and it's just lightly misty and cool, and I love harvesting Oregon grape, which is one of my most solid, powerful plants that I use for all kinds of infections and colds and flus, for stimulating my digestion. I use Oregon grape for almost everything. And then of course, after the time of Beltane in the southeast, the camas, which is one of my favorites. This is an incredible camas meadow that I spent several years in digging camas. It needs to be slow baked for many, many hours, for a day or maybe even 2 days. And so in the past few years, I've been practicing getting to know this plant by digging camas ovens in the earth and roasting camas the old way in fires with stones. And the summer solstice, of course, St. John's wort, one of my favorites. This plant embodies the sun and the energy of the sun completely in its flowers and in its little leaves, which have little solar windows which pick up all the rays of the sun and create all their medicine in it. And St. John's wort, the medicine is the medicine of the sun for our emotions, for struggling with depression and anxiety. The St. John's wort just brings the sunlight back to us. And of course, this time of year, the autumn time, when the huckleberries are going off. This is such a good berry year, by the way. If you've been to the mountains recently, the huckleberries are really happy. And huckleberries are a very important food crop for a lot of indigenous people around here. They were harvested, either pounded into little cakes like a fruit leather and dried in cakes, or harvested and dried and then mixed with other food like dried carbohydrate root flour and animal fat, or perhaps nut fat like pine nuts or hazelnuts or whatnot, to make pemmican, which is a little complete package of both many different kinds of foods, but also foods from many different seasons. So you have the berries, the nuts, and the roots, and you're like making a package of all the seasons into one really powerful, nutritious food. So huckleberries are very important in that way. And then, just to finish it off, to finish my map, I sketched a few of the places where I am when I'm picking those plants and being with them. I hope that in looking at the map that I've created and in thinking about these big pictures about creating a life that's more interconnected with place, that it's given some ideas or encouragement towards thinking about the relationships you already have or the relationships you want to build with wild plants and ways to bring them more fully into your life. And I want to leave you with just a few resources or references. And first of all, my contact information up there, it's a little small, I guess, sorry about that. My name, Heron Brae @gmail.com is my email. And I also teach classes at the Columbine School of Botanical Studies, which is a program here in town which is a really profound entryway into connecting with plants in the seasons and having right relationship with them. My book, a book by Phoenicia Medrano, my teacher growing up in occupied America, which is more about her life on the hoop and living a modern, seasonally migratory lifeway. Tending the Wild is about indigenous lifeways and land management in California. Nancy Turner is an ethnobotanist from BC who's written a lot about indigenous lifeways and how we can apply that in the modern world. And a new nonprofit, Sacred Hoop Rewilding, which is all dedicated to educating people about these lifeways. And the First Oregonians, very important information written by Native peoples about their way of life, and people from all over the state. And the last one's just a reference from where I got the picture for the Calapooya people digging canyons. And I would just like to say in conclusion, just that I hope that all of us can continue to deepen and remember ourselves as a connected part of this ecosystem and the body of this living earth, and that our lives can more and more support and grow in that reality and help us grow deeper with our place. So I really thank you all for listening and giving me your time and energy.